Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, today I'm coming to you from the end of Albert Road, and behind me some pretty beautiful scenes here on the southern side of Waiheke Island, where there's a vineyard just over this way called Goldie's, which is where all of the university students in Auckland come over to learn about making wine and viticulture. But anyway, here we are today on a Friday morning, early December 2025, and we've all just read a piece in the New Zealand Herald written by Matthew Hooton. Now, as you know, Matthew Hooton's a lobbyist, so basically what he writes is paid for, and basically that means that he's, kind of working for somebody, and therefore what he says must be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. But today, what he was trying to alert everybody about was that the Taxpayers Union were about to start a big campaign against Nicola Willis. Now, ironically, those that pay attention here will know that the Taxpayers Union and the New Zealand Initiative both are members of the same bird. They're wings of the same bird. And that means that basically something fishy is going on here when Nicola Willis comes from the New Zealand Initiative, which is kind of like the business roundtable view of the same agenda that the Taxpayers Union are always trying to work together on. But they come from more the sort of the keep the spending down perspective, and the common man, the farmer, the person that's a worker out there. So the two-pronged strategy, the two wings of the Atlas Network think tanks, is basically aiming at the upper-class business owner for the NZ Initiative, and for the Taxpayers Union, the Atlas Network is aiming at you, me, the common man, the worker. And the idea that government shouldn't be so big and expensive, and it should be small, and really we should all be free to do things like get rich without impediments from government getting in the way. Now that's very old 17th century John Locke kind of classical libertarianism, and generally speaking you find that the taxpayers unions all over the world, for there are many iterations of the same setup in New Zealand. It's not really a union, it's just kind of like a lobbying group really, set up to kind of underfund everything, all the public services, to try and make them kind of not work and privatise them ultimately. So that's the main goal. And it doesn't surprise anyone that the mother of all budgets from 1991, Ruth Richardson, the finance minister there, is the chair of the Taxpayers Union these days. Now, while the chair of such an organisation may not have any direct operational influence, they're basically setting the kind of the band, the direction. And as you all recall, Ruth Richardson, last time she got some coverage on Q&A, was banging away about how we needed to have rate caps in New Zealand. We need them now. We need them kind of tracked to inflation, CPI inflation. A few months later, what happens? The National Party, who are led round by the nose by the ACT Party, putting in this kind of cap and floor, 4% cap, 2% floor, based on long-run CPI inflation. So Ruth Richardson is still getting away and is exerting a huge amount of influence in order to run down New Zealand, make sure we don't spend enough, underinvest in hospitals, underinvest everywhere, basically. And the way that they do this is to try and make us feel that the governments are just taxing and spending. So at the other end of the spectrum, you've got Mike Hosking saying tax, borrow, spend. You've got Chris Luxon, who's kind of using that rhetoric, tax, borrow, spend. But this morning, the Taxpayers Union are under attack by Matthew Hooton, paid for by somebody, positioning the Taxpayers Union as a credible and believable source that have always wanted to be fair and not on any side at all. So that's rubbish. In the first place, I wouldn't trust that. What I would do is be deeply sceptical, because we've got a Taxpayers Union poll coming out next week. That's the Courier poll. That's a discredited poll in a way, because it's not endorsed by the Research Association in New Zealand that monitors the standards for polls. So it's quite likely that within the margin of error, it could be 3% more in favour of the coalition government than the actual mood of the nation really is. And we might see something similar from TVNZ on Monday night. So I'm betting that there's going to be some strong polls for the government now, even though that doesn't really represent the truth. And we have to really kind of wait for the Talbot Mills polls, which probably become sort of closer to Christmas when nobody's paying attention. Anyway, what did it say? What did Matthew's article say? Well, it said that the Taxpayers Union are deeply upset that Nicola Willis hasn't actually slashed and burned the public service much more than it has, and there's only something like a difference of 1,000 public servants. There's too many bureaucrats because everybody that works for the public service is some kind of waste of space, and unless you get down to some arbitrary number and you ignore things like population growth and inflation and how that affects everything, basically, you know, there's this kind of arbitrary target that it must be small. It's an ideological doctrine, you know. It's not based on reality or what's good for New Zealand. So the Taxpayers Union are supposedly very upset that Nicola Willis hasn't done more job slashing, particularly in places like Wellington where no one can get a job and everyone's having a hard time. They needed to go further and make things more miserable, cut and slash and burn, because ideologically the ACT Party, who are very, very aligned with the Taxpayers Union, and the same people associated with the ACT Party as are with the Taxpayers Union on many levels. I mean, just look at the membership. Basically they're kind of going at Willis and saying, well, Willis, you should have done more to, bring down things. When in fact, the argument is then really also about how much she has borrowed, as if borrowing is the worst thing that anyone can ever possibly do. When if you really look at borrowing, it's the cheapest form of raising capital to invest in things. And the real message that should be getting out there is not that all borrowing is bad, but in fact that there's borrowing on consumption is bad, but borrowing on investments for the future is good. And when we underinvest in the future, like we don't spend enough on hospitals or preparing for the next pandemic or building enough infrastructure so that, we've got good internet or we're prepared for what we really need when it comes to growing the population, then we basically have to always play catch up. And then we've got the Taxpayers Union being highlighted in headlines by media owned by people like, the Canadian billionaires and the right-wing people and the commercial operators. And they're kind of telling us and screaming at us that we've got to spend less, we've got to borrow less, we've got to get debt down, we've got to underinvest. And naughty Willis, because she hasn't actually gone far enough, she hasn't sacked enough people, she hasn't created more unemployment, she hasn't done the right thing, she's borrowed too much to pay for some of the bills for the landlords and, naughty Willis. Well, I think there's kind of like basically kind of the confused messaging here is that you've got the Labour Party under attack from the same people. And if you look back, you'll find that the Taxpayers Union had been there when it came to pumping up the groundswell, pumping up those kind of big protest movements, pumping up the attacks on people like Jacinda Ardern, pumping up things like anti-co-governance racism. They were right there doing all these big campaigns on those sorts of things. And at the same time, now we're all paying way more for water, aren't we, than we would have if we'd gone with Three Waters. So the Taxpayers Union is really not on our side when it's just saying, look, we're here to save you and your taxpayer money. Basically, they're there to underinvest, and so that eventually things don't work, so that we will privatise. And that's basically, in my opinion, what Jordan Williams is all about, is handing over things. And, basically this guy's, he's the head honcho from the Atlas Network of all the taxpayer unions all around the world, of which there's something like possibly, dozens and dozens and dozens, maybe 100 of them. And, Bill English, Sir Bill, he wrote the foreword for the Taxpayers Union and its 10-year anniversary. So these guys have been around, and the pollster, David Farrar, who is going to deliver this poll next week, he was one of the founding members of this Taxpayers Union. And he's doing these courier polls for the Taxpayers Union, who are closely associated with ACT. And the modus operandus, when you look at the people that study the Atlas Network, particularly sort of academics in Australia, they've said, well, one of the things that they always say is that they are fiercely independent, and this is part of the way in which they sell the fact that, they're definitely peddling in there, influencing like crazy, and we're not associated with any political party, but they truly are. And they're very much kind of the classical Libertarian ACT Party is where they fit in the political spectrum. So I think what you're seeing here is some kind of convoluted message from one wing of the Atlas Network about the other wing of it, and trying to kind of get some kind of credibility back, I think, in a way, just before the books are opened on the 16th of December. And we see, once again, probably how things haven't really improved that much under Nicola Willis and, the ferries, the fact that the other day we found out that the deficit has widened, the tax take is down, the claims that Christopher Luxon is making about green shoots because of business confidence are decoupled from the economy. Tourism hasn't actually returned to how high it was under the Labour Party back pre-COVID. We don't actually have anything official about manufacturing returning to being in a good way. We know that jobs in manufacturing are down. And, you've just got retail proving once again with Black Friday results being down in a slump that things aren't back, and just one shop here opening like IKEA isn't going to solve all that, and neither is one supermarket, which brings me on to the supermarket side of things. Now, opposition parties are all united against the latest and greatest terrible assault on democracy, which is the way that Chris Bishop is driving through some legislation which fast-tracks supermarket consents. And that's disingenuous, according to all opposition parties, and they're basically really upset that what's going on here is basically environmental protections have been stripped away. The time or the means in which people can actually engage, if you're a Maori, iwi or hapu, you're going to be left out of the picture. You're not going to be able to appeal the decisions that are made by Bishop and co. The ministers are going to have way more power over these panels. The panels are not going to have much time to make decisions. Everything's being weakened, and it's really not going to help supermarkets. It's not going to lower the price of butter. You're not going to get cheaper vegetables. It's not really going to do anything to help you. So this is fast-tracking corporate takeover of New Zealand. But get out of the way, all you Maori people. Get out of the way, democracy. Get out, stamping on local voice. We've got the power. We're the ministers. And they're just driving this through under urgency. And it's the urgency and the way in which the processes are being pushed aside by this government that should upset everybody who cares about democracy or believes in democracy, because they ain't following that process now. And it's an outrage. And this is in our news this morning. And, we're actually going to hear some noise about the way in which this fast tracking is really bad for us. At the end of the day, it's a ruinous thing. And those comparisons with other countries and what we should be doing, it's all driven from the same Atlas Network crowd. So these think tanks, they've got a grip, haven't they, on us? They've got a grip on our newspapers, our headlines. We've got people in the press that kind of come from these places. Old Atlas Luke, he's got that position down at the Post. We've got all those appointments and all that alignment, everywhere you look. It's all aligned around this kind of thinking that we need to scale down debt. Debt is so bad, it's terrible and evil. But in actual fact, where we sit at the moment means we've still got a lot of headroom, and should there be a big problem, we'd still be okay. We are not necessarily going to fall into some sort of terrible trap. And if we do vote for Barbara Edmonds, she's going to be responsible. She's going to look to direct money into things like climate change, the real problems, going to address the cost of living crisis, going to take some real action there that Willis hasn't. And we're going to see people do something about things like housing instead of just trying to move the homeless out of sight that we create by making it impossible to get an emergency home. It will be possible to get one again. You'll be treated with dignity and as a person. And, we'll also see things like the cost of living. There'll be some relief for people who are very much on the breadline. Benefits will be better. The wages will keep up. And we'll probably do more for our public health than we're seeing at the moment. And our education will be a little bit more inclusive instead of this ideological doctrine that's driven through all the time. So I don't want to go on too long, but basically Matthew Hooton was doing a piece this morning for somebody he was paid for, and he was having a go at Nicola Willis. And next week, on the 16th, the books will open for the yearly update. And remember last year, it was a total disaster for Nicola Willis because things have got so much worse under her financial stewardship. And a year has gone by and things have just got worse. People, when they ask, are you better off now than you were under Labour? They all say, no, I'm actually a bit worse off now. Things aren't actually any better under Christopher Luxon. LuxCon's been having a good old time with Mike Hosking exchanging gifts this morning. Mike Hosking is off on a very early, lazy holiday. He's very, very wealthy, and he's off on a big goofing off holiday because he doesn't have to work like most people. And yeah, they exchanged some gifts, which is a tradition. And yeah, what we're seeing now is the way in which the delusional people like Mr. LuxCon saying he's one of the real people, one of the real men. He's come from a middle-class background. He's very much in touch. And so, you know, everything's going to be all good. But in actual fact, things aren't great for Christopher LuxCon right now. And he's very, very unpopular. And we're actually going to see that popularity not improve when these books are open, in my opinion, nor are we going to see much in the way of anyone believing any poll that tells you that Christopher LuxCon is more favourable or more popular than Chris Hipkins right now. So that's all I have to say this morning. We did a piece this morning here at G News on the Jacinda hater bots and how irrational they are and how they need to get a grip and get round the idea that there was a global pandemic which is continually taken out of the context when you look at the last 6 years by people like Christopher LuxCon when he looks at the results. Remember that pandemic came with a 100-year economic shock, and that was not normal times for anybody. So when you do comparisons, you've got to take that into account. And under the circumstances, we did bloody well as a country, and good on Jacinda Ardern for actually being successful. Her documentary comes out on the 5th of December, which is today, in the UK, and well done, in line for an Oscar, and congratulations, everybody. Don't be cowed by bots, by social media bots that aren't even real, that can't spell. And have a lovely Friday, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.